For a math warm-up today, we are going to be saying these decimals out loud. So I want you to take a look at number 1. Pause your video and say that decimal out loud. You should have said 359 and 0 tenths. Okay, let's take a look at the second one. How would you say that decimal? Pause your video, say it to yourself. You should have said 35 and 90 hundredths. Don't forget that TH at the end. Number 3, take a look at that decimal. Pause your video, say it out loud. You should have said 3 and 590 thousandths with a TH at the end. Let's try number 4. Pause your video. You should have said 10,745 and 63 hundredths with a TH at the end. And the last one, go ahead, pause your video, try that one as well. You should have said 107,456 and 3 tenths. Did you say it? Keep practicing if you didn't quite get that. Our math message today, it goes like this. A human heart beats about 3 2/10 million times per month. How could you write 3 2/10 million in standard notation? So go ahead and pause your video and see if you can think about what that would look like. Try to write it out and see how you do. Okay, so let's take a look at how do we do this. So notice I have inserted a place value chart here, and as you can see, when we get into the millions, we have to make the print really small so we can fit it across the screen. So when I look back up at the number here in the problem, we have 3 2/10 of a million. So if I use my place value chart, I'm going to find the millions place, which is here, and I'm going to place a 3. Now, we go back here, it's decimal point and then a 2/10, right, of a million. So we're going to come all the way down here. Here is my tenths place. So that means that 2 is going to be all the way down here. What do we do for all of the other places? We insert zeros. So a 0 would be in the 100,000s, the 10,000s, the thousands, the hundreds, the tens, and the ones. Okay? That's how we would write that in standard notation. Standard notation is just the regular way that we would write a number. So in reality, when we go to put in all of our commas, then we're going to count starting here, 1, 2, 3, and then you're going to place a comma, and then 1, 2, 3, and you're going to place that next comma. So that's what that number would look like. Did you figure it out? Our lesson today is multiplying and dividing decimals by powers of 10. Why are we multiplying and dividing decimals? We need to be able to understand our place value system a little bit better. And we need to understand how multiplying and dividing by powers of 10 can change the value of the number. And that's going to make sense when we get into the meat of this lesson. So how are we going to go about this? Well, guess what? Today, you get to use a calculator. Woohoo! We're also going to use a grid or a table, place value chart to kind of help us out. So those are the tools that we're going to be using. So let's first take a look at a calculator. Now, most of you have a cell phone, and I'm going to guess that your cell phone has a calculator. Now, when you open up your calculator, it probably does not look like this. So with my phone, I know that I have to turn it sideways, and it gives me these additional keys that you see here that you don't normally use. And you're going to get to use some of these keys later on in your math career. But what we're going to focus on today is the one right here that looks like I would have a number. So a number would be the x, right? And then here is my exponent. So we are going to be using powers of 10 today. And so we will be using a calculator to do some of these calculations. So let's say that I was going to find the value of a decimal, right? Let's say that the decimal was 57 2/10, and we want to multiply that times 10 to the second power. So on my calculator, what I would do, I'm going to type in the 57 2/10. So I'm going to punch 5, 7, and then I'm going to hit the decimal point, and then the 2. And then I'm going to come over here and hit the multiplication sign, times. And then I'm going to type the number 10. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to hit this x to the second power. Now on my calculator, it automatically gave me the answer. And it gave me an answer of 5,720. Now, this is going to be one of those things where you might need to play around with it and practice and see what the keys do for you. So another thing that you can do with your calculator if you're unsure or you can't figure out which button it is to use for your exponents. Let's say that we were going to take the number, let's do 47 3600, and we're going to take that times 10 to the fourth power. So another option would be, if you can't get these keys or figure out what to do, is to actually punch the 4, the 7, decimal point, 36 times, and then we're going to do 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, and then equals. And that should give you your answer for that problem. So basically, we're just taking that 10 to the fourth power and we're multiplying 10 4 times that 47 and 3600. So that would be another option for you if you can't quite figure out which button works for your particular calculator. The other thing is to play with those buttons and figure out which one's giving you the correct answer. So that'll be a little exploration activity with your calculator to practice with. Now, how would this problem change if we needed to divide instead of add or multiply, sorry? What would change? What button would we push instead of the multiplication sign? We would push the division sign. That's how that would change. So just make sure that if you're multiplying, you're going to push this one. If you're dividing, of course, you're going to push that division sign, which is located right there. Another tool that we can use in multiplying and dividing with decimals is a place value chart. And the reason we want to take a look at this is to get a better understanding of what actually happens when we are multiplying versus dividing. So as we look here at the place value chart, of course we have 100 millions down here at this end, and we go all the way to thousandths in decimal form. We also, with this particular chart, can see that if I were in the 100 millions place, that would be 10 to the 8th power as an exponent. 10 millions would be 10 to the 7th, millions would be 10 to the 6th, and so on. But notice how those values change down here when we get to the decimals. So we're in the tenths, we have 1/10 to the 1st power. Hundredths is 1/10 to the 2nd power. And thousandths is 1/10 to the 3rd power. So what we're going to do right now is you're going to watch me place some numbers in the chart and see how the values change as we multiply by 10 or an exponent with 10, okay? So my first number that I'm going to start with is 5 and 45 hundredths. So if I plug those into the chart, you can kind of see the value of each one of those digits. And now if I take 5 and 45 hundredths and I multiply that times 10 to the 1st power, then my number is going to look like this. And then if we take that decimal and multiply times 10, it's going to look like this. And if we do it again, we have this number. And if we kept going, do you see some kind of pattern happening there? Each time we multiply, our digits are moving one place to the left in the place value chart. Okay, so what happens when we divide? So let's say we're going to divide with this particular decimal. We have 7 and 26 hundredths. And let's say that we're going to divide by 10 to the 1st power. So what's going to happen is the 7 that is in the ones currently would then move to the 10ths place because we're dividing. Now we know when we divide, our numbers get smaller, not bigger. So look what happens. And then if I divide again, then we would have, and I don't have enough space here, but we would have another column there that we would place that 6. So notice what's happening to that decimal point. When we multiplied, the decimal point was actually moving to the right and the number was getting bigger. But when we divide, the decimal point is moving to the left and the number is getting smaller. So very important concept to remember there. So you will be completing some problems in class where you will be taking a decimal and you're going to multiply or divide by a power of 10. You're going to write that number in standard notation. So remember, standard notation would be, this would be standard notation. Okay, just like we would write a regular number or decimal. Right? You're going to write it in standard notation, and then you have to decide, did I move the decimal to the left when I multiplied, or did I move it to the right? depending on whether you're multiplying or dividing, and how many places did you move it? Did you move it the number that is in the exponent? So let's investigate that for a minute. So when we look at this decimal right here, if we divide that by 10 to the first power, look where the decimal point is now. It is between the 0 and the 7. But when we divide by 10 to the first power, that decimal point is actually moving one place to the left, which is where we have it here. Okay, sometimes it's a little bit easier to see. So let's say that we take a look at this bottom decimal that I wrote here, the 6 and 72 hundredths. So if I multiply that by, let's say, 10 to the second power, okay, what's going to happen? Am I going to move the decimal point to the right or to the left? We're actually going to move it to the right. And if it's to the second power, we're going to move that decimal point 2 places. 1, 2. So my number would be 672. But if I were dividing that, so let's take that same number and we're dividing by 10 to the second power. Instead of moving my decimal to the right, for my number to get bigger, it's going to go to the left. So it's going to go 1, 2. So decimal point is going to be here, and we place a 0 in that spot. So it's going to be 0 and 672 10,000ths, right? And we haven't talked about that place yet, but that's what it would look like. Okay, so just to give you an idea, depending on your exponent number, that's going to determine how many places you're going to move that decimal point roughly when you get the hang of this, and whether you're multiplying or dividing is going to determine whether you are moving it to the right or to the left. So let's summarize what we've done today. We have discovered that we can use a calculator to multiply and divide decimals by powers of 10. When we multiply, the decimal moves to the right. When we divide, the decimal moves to the left. Thanks for watching, guys.